Welcome back! Today I thought we'd have some fun with the political compass. Normally how this works is someone records their screen for approximately 40 minutes as they drool over every individual question of a biased survey and go, I would mostly agree, but I'm not sure if they meant it in this other way, so I'm going to somewhat disagree. That's boring, so instead I'm just going to jump straight to the end and tell you my quiz results. But not just one quiz, oh no, we're going to do 33 quizzes. I'm going to tell you the results of virtually every political compass quiz I've taken in the last 2 years, and I'm even going to show you how some of them have changed over time. And since people can't seem to decide whether to call me a strawberry unicorn libtard cuck or a turbo dyke anime Nazi, this should finally lay the debate to rest. Before we start, I'd like to just briefly give my thoughts on the conventional political compass. I've already explained this in large part in my video Rebuilding the Political Dichotomy, which if you haven't seen, I recommend and will link in the description. But something I didn't mention in that video is where people tend to place a certain dictator on the political spectrum. Partisan left-wingers like to place Hitler in the far upper right corner of the map, while partisan right-wingers like to put him in the far upper left corner alongside Mao and Stalin. I think Hitler belongs somewhere in the top center of the map. His social policies echoed right-wing sentiments, and his economic policies echoed left-wing sentiments. Fascist policy has variously been described as a syncretic fusion between far-left Bolshevik socialism and far-right ultranationalism. That's even where Nazis got their name, National Socialism. This has also been referred to as the third position, and in practice, fascist policy is heavily corporatist, which, out of context, I would still normally place in the authoritarian center, as it's what I would describe as a mixed economy after it's been corrupted. And yes, that's right, I just said corporatism isn't a right-wing invention. Free market capitalism abhors state intervention, and corporatism is what you get when big business and big government love each other very much. Now you may be wondering, if corporations and Hitler, two of the most cartoonishly evil characters in politics, aren't part of the authoritarian right, then what is? Well, let's think about it. On the far left of the political spectrum you have communism, right? Hyper-collectivism to span the globe. And in the middle you start getting into nationalism. Still somewhat collectivist, but our scope has shrunk way down. By the time you reach the far right, all you're left with is individualism. But what does authoritarian hyper-individualism look like? Monarchy. Emperor Gaius Caligula, King Alexander the Great, Tsar Ivan the Terrible. These guys ruled and conquered nations just for themselves, and you don't really think about them because most political discussion is framed as if recorded history began during World War II. This makes even more sense when you think on how frequently the libertarian right wing are thought of as advocating veiled feudalism. That's all I wanted to say about that. Let's just get on with the actual topic of the video and see where I belong on the political spectrum. By the way, almost all of these will be listed in the video description, so you can go ahead and take them yourself. Naturally, we have to start with the tried and true, the original meme itself, the Political Compass quiz at politicalcompass.org. This one put me center-left on the libertarian side. I took this one a couple years ago, and it's about the same place Sargon was when he took it. I actually retook this quiz, and it now puts me dead center. I moved a little bit right, but not as far right as Sargon did, curiously, who is now center-right. But that's just according to one quiz. We got 32 more to go, so let's start crushing these out. On GoToQuiz.com, there's a political spectrum quiz, and it describes me as a right social libertarian. Another quiz at IDRlabs.com appears to agree with my relative position on the map, but seems to think I'm a far-right liberal. Meanwhile, over on Playbuzz.com, we have the definitive political orientation test. But instead of far right, it says I'm way the fuck far left. I'm almost an anarcho-communist. I actually retook this quiz 2 years later, and I did not move an inch. They are convinced I am a left libertarian. iSidewith.com also features a political quiz, and it's one of my favorites. It's very long, it gives you a ton of optional questions with a lot of different answers to choose from, including user-submitted responses, and it tells you what political party or candidate you agree with most. This is actually a neat way of learning about some of the people running for office. Anyway, iSidewith said, I agree with the Libertarian Party 65% of the time, and it describes me as a centrist. However, I retook this quiz a couple years later, and it now says I agree with the Libertarian Party 74% of the time, and on the map it swung me way out into the deep far right. I don't think it's just me though, because if you look at old screenshots of the iSidewith map, you can see the main parties clustered around the center, and then gradually move outwards until they occupy the perimeter of the compass. A statement about increasing political divisions, Personally, I think this is more informed by the creators' opinions of where the different parties belong in their head, rather than the parties' positions actually changing. Republicans and Democrats today are by and large saying the same thing they were a decade ago. Donald Trump talking about violence in video games? What is this, a Clinton PSA from 2005? Perhaps the Republican and Democratic parties have more in common after all.
Fuck you, asshole. Fuck you, asshole.
Back to the grind. Another fun quiz can be found at specker.org. I like this quiz not just because it has an attractive minimalist design or because it shows your position move with each question you answer, but it's clearly made by people with an anarcho-capitalist bent, so it asks some pretty unique and targeted questions. Surprise, surprise, I'm practically one of them. I am a libertarian capitalist. I retook this quiz 2 years later, and I'm even more of a libertarian capitalist than I was before. On the flip side, however, if we stroll on over to c4ss.org, a self-described left-market anarchist think tank, you can find a quiz that describes me as a leftist, a liberal, a libertarian, and an anti-statist. You heard it here first, Omnizoa supports tolerance, exploration, and diversity. I like this one too, just because it asks me questions you really don't see in other quizzes. Speaking of other quizzes, have you heard of the Nolan chart? It's basically a political compass, but in a diamond shape. You can find one of these at pollquiz.com, and it describes me as a libertarian. I retook this quiz a couple years later, and I am a slightly more center-libertarian. Another version of the Nolan chart can be found at theadvocates.org, a libertarian website describing the quiz as the world's smallest political quiz. I'm not sure that's anything to brag about, considering it implies you're massively oversimplifying politics, but okay, what does it say? I'm libertarian. What a shock. I also retook this quiz, and I also moved closer to the center. Look at that, just one step away from anarchy. Scary. Well, now that we've seen the world's smallest quiz and the definitive quiz, let's up the ante and check out the best quiz at bestpoliticalquiz.com. What's that? Your political quiz has only 4 sides? Hold my beer. 5 sides, motherfucker! You are a Republican, a social conservative, and a capitalist. Well, for the best political quiz, it sure seems like it managed to get everything wrong. I was only 10 points away from being a Democrat. Why is Democrat and Republican on a spectrum anyway? It should be a binary question. You either want a democracy or a republic. Oh, but Omnizoa, you say. You're so intolerant of diversity. Don't you know there's 128 genders of political thought between Democrat and Republican? I can't help but think back to Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, where he describes government as dictated by the many, the few, or the one. Democracy, aristocracy, or monarchy. Or as modern liberal political pundits would put it, first there's Democrats, then there's Republicans, then there's Hitler. But enough of that. Clearly the best political quiz didn't live up to its E3 trailer, so let's check out uquiz.com's ultimate political compass quiz. This is the quiz to end all quizzes. You thought you knew politics before? Prepare your mind to be blown. Question 1 of 1. Yes? Yes. Elitist aristocrat. Over on Ideological.com, we can find a quiz similar to the Nolan chart, except this time your position begins at freedom and moves away from it as you answer questions. This one says I'm on the border between libertarian and conservative. VoteCompass.com also features multiple political quizzes, except this website is run by the AIDS factory known as Vox.com, whose about page I cannot help but to tell every person I meet literally implies their readers are sheep.
And he puzzled and puzzled, till his puzzler was sore, until Omnizoa thought of something he hadn't before.
Maybe this quiz,
He thought,
wasn't made by a scientist. Maybe this quiz, perhaps, was made by a fucksack journalist. You know, this quiz isn't all that strange except for the fact that they switched the libertarian-authoritarian axis with the conservative-progressive one. Smells faintly of a false dichotomy to me. You're telling me Gary Johnson's not even a little bit conservative? Not even fiscally conservative? He's just a right-wing progressive to you? I don't think even Vox believes that. I think this map was made just to make Donald Trump appear way more fucking fringe than he actually is, and Clinton way more progressive than she actually is. All I get from this is they couldn't decide whether or not I was a progressive or conservative, but they're damn sure I'm right-wing, whatever I am. Shocker. This one from the politicalaffiliationquiz.org, I'm not even sure how to read. It says, I'm a liberal libertarian, but I'm right on the border between liberal and conservative. And there's also some weird persuasion versus physical coercion thing. Is that their interpretation of the liberty-authority axis? This one's also pretty weird. Politics.beasts.org also replaces the liberty-authority axis with a pragmatism versus idealism spectrum. I guess I'm a pragmatic centrist. A bunch of these don't actually have any compass diagrams, but they still spit out political alignment, so let's go through a few of those. Abtirsi.com features the 5-dimension political compass quiz, which says I'm a right-leaning, libertarian, humanist, liberal. Quite a mouthful. Another quiz at gotoquiz.com called Where Are You on the Political Spectrum describes me as a libertarian first, then a conservative, then a wingnut, then a moderate. I am 3% more wingnut than moderate. Sounds about right. Quizany.com says I am libertarian right. A crowdpack.com survey describes me as a harmonious conservative, comparing me to Ron Paul and Rand Paul. I'd like to note that this is the only survey I couldn't find again, so there will not be a link to this one in the description. Sorry about that. Youthleadership.net calls me a moderate conservative. You probably most agree with the views of the Republican Party. You may also be interested in the Libertarian Party. A Pew Research political topology quiz at people-press.org determined me to be a core conservative. Core conservative, incidentally, is the farthest right-wing position on their scale. To be honest, I'm a little disappointed in Pew. In contrast to all these claims that I'm a right-wing conservative, ProProfs.com simply says I'm left-wing. You are more devoted to human needs than a liberal. You believe the free market is not the most important aspect of our economic system. You know what, let's just take all the tests. Allthetests.com just cuts straight to the chase and calls me a centrist hoe. Well, geez, you didn't have to put it like that. You're like most people, unable to make up your mind. Or maybe you're like a libertarian, whose ideas are all over the map. Anyway, you're the target of most ad campaigns because your votes actually affect the outcome of elections, you attention whore you. I like that one. PoliticalSextant.com says I am 100% anarcho-capitalist. Well, I know a few people who would disagree with you on that one, myself included. It also says I'm an 88% match for free market environmentalism and a 75% match for synthesis anarchism. Suggested reading, Placeholders for Dummies. That's not really a book, is it? Alright, let's cut that out before I get another copyright strike. There are many quizzes on SelectSmart.com, but this one is called the Vossum Chart Locator, and it says I am a 100% match for an anarcho-syndicalist. So that's another one that says I'm left-wing. Just a heads up to anyone who doesn't know me already. I'm not an anarchist, and it shouldn't be that hard to figure out I'm not an anarchist. Are you anti-state, yes or no? One of the most popular quizzes these days is the 8 Values quiz, which you can find at 8values.github.io. When I first took it 2 years ago, it said I was a classical liberal. Retaking it again shows I am an ultra-capitalist. I can kinda understand how I've shifted down the economic axis from market to capitalist, but some of this other stuff just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I'm now 12% more authoritarian and 10% more traditional. Where did that come from? Another website, politiscales.net, is like 8 Values, but instead of 8 values, there are 16. This one says I'm an essentialist, a progressive, an internationalist, laissez-faire capitalist. It says I lean 50% in favor of revolution over reform, but I swear that's just because it kept asking me whether I thought violent revolution could be effective. Well, yeah, violent revolution can be effective. It has demonstrably affected change throughout history in various countries. The United States and Soviet Russia literally would not exist without violent revolution. And you're asking me, does this work? Yes. Yes, it works. That doesn't mean I'm making Molotov cocktails as we speak. Calm the fuck down. Speaking of Soviet Russia, our Zamas.academy asks, who are you in 1917 Russia? I am far away from the political forces of 1917 Russia. Looks like I am a center-right Democrat. I took this quiz a few times reinterpreting the questions, and the closest I got to any of the factions listed here was a Menshevik defensist. Looks like I would not have been on Lenin's side. This quiz from chartsme.com doesn't even ask me political questions, but instead just asks me to rate my disgust and aversion towards certain things like walking through graveyards and touching dead cats. Your brain is a Democrat. 54% liberal. I'm gonna guess Republicans are less cool with the whole picnic in a cemetery thing. NSE.com features an exclusive quiz, the one and only F-Scale. It tests how big of a fat you are. To everyone on Reddit and beyond who's ever called me a fascist, here's your final confirmation. Am I a fascist? Drumroll, please. You are a liberal airhead. Looks like I ranked pretty high on sex, so looks like I'm about as big a degenerate as I think I am, but not as big a degenerate as I am a cynic. Allsides.com features a unique little quiz which just straight up asks me whether I lean left or right on certain ranges of issues. Based on your stances, you're center. Finally, these last two aren't really quizzes, but quote-unquote political simulators. You basically plug in policies you like and it gives you a summary of your model government. Filteries.com describes my ideal state as a centrist minarchy. I retook it a couple years later and I'm in about the same spot. It would be a supranational world state run by a constitutional direct democracy with free market capitalism and liberal cosmopolitanism. Whatever that means. Honestly, I had to look it up. Apparently, cosmopolitanism is like you're inclusive of other cultures and nations, but we all share the same moral, legal, and economic system. I like it. It's like multiculturalism, but without Reza Aslan having to go out and eat human brains in the desert to virtue signal to his sycophant audience. I learned something today. And last, but certainly not least, we have nationstates.net, a browser game based on a book ripping off another book. It's been described as George Orwell's 1984, if the bad guys were capitalists instead of communists, and by capitalists I mean corporatists. Yeah, it doesn't sound very good. The community basically writes up mock dilemmas with various answers, and you, role-playing as the non-specific leader of your OC nation, choose how to solve each one, and your choices affect it in various ways. After tinkering around with it for a few months, the Grand Confederacy of Gravehearts, with its excellent political freedoms, thriving economy, and very good civil rights, has received the classification of a New York Times democracy, which the wiki describes as a political system marked by having all facets of the government voted on by the newshound public that is kept well informed by seemingly limitless media outlets. It's sort of technocratic. And that about wraps it up. Here's a rough tally of the different political compass positions I occupied and the words that were used to describe me. As you can see, if there's anything these quizzes consistently agreed on, it was that I was libertarian. Quizzes were only half as confident that I was right-wing, though, and described me as a liberal almost as frequently as a conservative. That is, if I wasn't simply assigned a centrist. Capitalist came up frequently, which I would blame on the common conflation of capitalism with the market economy. I don't think it's fair to conflate socialism with the command economy, but many people don't like to use these terms as broadly as I do. I was occasionally described as a Democrat, and only once as a Republican, which I think is an interesting contrast to how often I was labeled left-wing compared to right-wing. Outside of US politics, I define Democrat and Republican far more narrowly and would easily identify myself as a Democrat, as I don't believe a republic is a tenable system of government. But given the context of US politics, I'm frankly loath to describe myself as a Democrat since most of them are New Deal liberals, aka sock Dems, while classical liberals have more in common with Republicans. It's the understatement of the century just to describe it as a mess, and the mess extends to these quizzes as well. Just look at how schizophrenic they are trying to decide where liberal belongs in the political compass. This one says liberalism is the whole lower hemisphere, this one says liberalism is the dead center of the map, and this one says liberalism is the entire left quadrant. Make up your goddamn minds! And that's not all, the questions are frequently misleading too, if not straight up oversimplified in order to produce a desired result. Abortion is an especially annoying one. Do you believe in a woman's right to choose? Agree, disagree. Sometimes it'll be framed with exceptions like, I'm pro-life, except when medical complications threaten the mother. What about the child? You want a baby to be born with half its organs or to only live long enough to choke on its own blood? Why are these questions almost always framed as if these are merely the personal choices of a pregnant mother? There are 2 lives being affected here. Don't erase one just because it hasn't left the womb yet. I don't agree with any of the religious justifications right-wingers make for the pro-life side here, but the shitty pro-choice options undoubtedly push me to the right on some of these quizzes. The same goes for capital punishment too. Why should the death penalty be a right-wing thing anyway? Authoritarian, perhaps, but I just think it's the pragmatic, centrist thing to do. It's cheaper than life in prison, and it's a permanent solution to people who have literally nothing but harm to contribute to society. And to the inevitable pedant who's going to pull some article out of their ass to show me how capital punishment costs however many millions more dollars than prison time, shut the fuck up. Bullets cost pennies. It's not shooting someone in the head that racks up the bill, it's bureaucratic molasses caking up the gears that causes prisoners to die of boredom on death row and criminal trials to get dragged out for years. It is one of the laziest arguments in the world to say that you can't solve one problem because it would require you to solve another. Just thinking about how fucking infuriating that is has completely derailed my train of thought. I don't even know how to transition away from this.
Yo, I'm hungry and I need to go to the bathroom. Hey, you! Make me a sandwich!
You know, in Mother Russia, one sandwich feeds entire village for 30 days.
I'll feed my foot up your ass for 30 days if you don't feed me!
Let's do this!
Many of the questions are just bad. Here are some of the worst. Should teachers be allowed to carry a fireman? Only if they get certified. When you are troubled, it's better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. Strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree. How does this affect any of my political positions? This is like one of those bad online job applications that tries to judge your character by asking you 30 million different times if you would steal from the workplace. Education? No school vouchers, large increase to federal funding. No school vouchers, increase federal funding. Lower income school vouchers, increase federal funding. School vouchers for lower income students. School vouchers for anyone. Every single option is throw more money at the problem. Where's the pull the plug option so I can watch public education's heart monitor just go? I would rather eat a piece of fruit than a piece of paper. Strongly disagree, mildly agree, strongly agree, or neutral. I don't even know what to say about that. Favorite TV commentator? Bill O'Reilly, Keith Olbermann, Rachel Maddow, Anderson Cooper, or Glenn Beck? Talk about tough questions. You may as well have asked me what my favorite flavor of cancer is. Testicular cancer? Ass cancer? Breast cancer? Brain cancer? Or fat people on mobility scooters? There are way more bad questions, especially in nation states, but I'm going to save those for another video. Overall, these questions exist to catalog people who exist in a relatively narrow cross-section of political thought, usually limited to the range of mainstream contemporary opinions of North America and Western Europe. Several topics, which I feel strongly about, never appeared or popped up only once or twice. Animal rights, intellectual property, and the distribution of land being big ones. It's also frustrating to see concepts like liberalism and libertarianism, or capitalism and corporatism getting carelessly conflated. And if certain questions had just a hair more nuance, or were rephrased, I'd have given totally different answers, all of which certainly would have impacted the final tally. So, at the end of it all, what can you call me? Well, I think you can call me whatever you like. I'm partial to honey, or snookums. Pumpkin if you're feeling frisky. But if I were to describe myself, politically, I would have to say geolibertarian is the most encompassing of my beliefs. I would also generically describe myself as a libertarian, minarchist, centrist, Georgist, or classical liberal. I think all of these are relatively good descriptors. I also think democracy and the market are two sides of the same coin. The productive power of the open forum in both cases is most effective when it has the fewest restrictions. This allows all sides to compete with and leverage each other in order to make something great. But I do still believe there need to be restrictions. Liberty run rampant tends to get people trampled. You may recall a quote from earlier, ex minimum porto maximus. From the minimum, bring forth the maximum. I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and there's a lot to say about it, how it's relevant not only to politics, but science and life in general. I can't get into it now, unfortunately. This video wound up much longer than I intended, but I hope I can expand on the subject sometime in the near future, and I would appreciate it if you consider stopping by. Maybe dropping a knock on the little window of my padded cell and giving me a wave. I'd appreciate that. It's nice to know there's other people out there. But if you're feeling adventurous and can't help but take a step inside with me, there's some important things I need you to remember. Bring an open mind. Leave your taboos at the door, because nothing is immune to criticism. And above all else, question everything. Thank you very much for listening.